I'm Serenity Martin, and I'm 25 years old. For most of my life, I've been the quiet one, the responsible one, the one who just handled things. My younger brother Alexander, who's 21, was always the opposite, loud, demanding, and perpetually the center of our mother, Rosalind's, world. She's 48, and her world revolves around appearances and Alexander's latest perceived crisis. 2 days ago, Rosalind sat me down at the kitchen table, her face a mask of weary concern. "Serenity," she started, her voice soft, almost a whisper. "Alexander is really struggling. His anxiety, it's just so bad. He needs space. He needs your room." My room. The one I'd lived in since I was 6. The one I paid rent for, even though it was a fraction of what I contributed in groceries, utilities, and general upkeep of the house. I worked 2 jobs, a barista in the mornings and a freelance graphic designer in the evenings, just to keep my head above water and still help out at home. My mother, Rosalind, had always called me her rock, her responsible one. Now, I was apparently a roadblock to Alexander's healing. "He needs to be comfortable, Serenity," she'd continued, avoiding my eyes. "He needs a space that's truly his own, where he can feel safe. You understand, don't you? As his sister?" I understood. I understood that Alexander had discovered a new way to manipulate her, and she was, as always, falling for it. I understood that my comfort, my stability, meant nothing compared to his manufactured fragility. I just nodded, numb. Today, the numbness broke. I walked in from my morning shift, the smell of stale coffee still clinging to my uniform, and stopped dead in the hallway. The door to my room was wide open. Inside, Rosalind was holding up swatches of dark grey fabric against the wall, while Alexander, sprawled on my bed, scrolled through his phone, a smirk playing on his lips. "No, Mom, that's too light," Alexander drawled, not even looking up. "I need something more moody, like a proper man cave, and definitely a bigger TV. Serenity's is like ancient." Rosalind chuckled, a light, airy sound that grated on my ears. "Of course, sweetie. Whatever you need to feel better. We'll get you the biggest one Best Buy has, and maybe that gaming chair you wanted." They hadn't even waited. 2 days. 2 days, and they were already planning the demolition of my personal space, my sanctuary. My stomach twisted. I stood there, invisible, watching them carve up my life. Finally, Rosalind turned, her eyes widening slightly when she saw me. Her smile faltered for a split second, then snapped back into place, saccharine sweet. "Oh, Serenity! Just discussing Alexander's new therapy space. He's going to feel so much better in here, aren't you, darling?" She beamed at Alexander, who finally looked up, offering me a lazy, triumphant grin. My heart hammered against my ribs, a dull, painful thud. I wanted to scream, to shatter the fake serenity of their conversation, but I didn't. I just stared at them, my face a carefully blank mask. Rosalind picked up a black trash bag from the floor, the kind we used for lawn clippings. She held it out to me, her expression shifting to one of practiced sympathy. "Here, sweetie, for your things. Just the essentials, you know? We need to clear out the big stuff for Alexander's new furniture. I'm sure you have friends you can crash with for a bit, while you look for a place." A trash bag. For 25 years of my life. For my memories, my quiet moments, my everything. My hands trembled as I took it, the crinkling plastic a mocking sound in the sudden silence. Alexander watched, still smirking. I could feel the hot sting behind my eyes, but I refused to let a single tear fall. Not in front of them. They didn't deserve to see me break. I walked into my room, past them, and started pulling clothes from my closet, shoving them haphazardly into the bag. My university textbooks, the framed photos of my grandfather and me, the small wooden box where I kept my important documents, all went into a duffel bag I'd had since high school. I worked quickly, mechanically, my mind racing. They thought they were stripping me bare. But they were wrong. I had my car keys in my pocket. My car was parked outside, fully paid off. And they had no idea I still had the spare key to the family storage unit, where most of my grandfather's furniture and some of my childhood keepsakes were stored. They also didn't know I was still the co-signer on the family safety deposit box at the bank, a box Rosalind rarely bothered with, but which held a few sentimental family heirlooms. I zipped up the duffel bag, grabbed the trash bag, and walked out without another word. Rosalind called after me, "Let me know where you end up, sweetie. We worry." Alexander just snickered. I didn't look back. I just got in my car, started the engine, and drove. I drove until the familiar streets blurred, until the sun began to set, until I found myself parked in a quiet corner of a nearly empty supermarket parking lot. The anger was a cold, hard knot in my chest. They wanted me gone. They wanted my space. They wanted me to disappear. I pulled out my phone, the screen glowing in the dimming light. I opened the shared backup email account I'd set up years ago for family photos and shared documents. I scrolled through the drafts folder, the one they rarely checked, and there it was, a draft email titled Man Cave Must-Haves. The first item on the list, Serenity's 50-inch TV. The second, Serenity's end tables. The email draft confirmed it. They weren't just kicking me out, they were stripping me. My TV, my end tables, things I'd bought with my own money, things that were unequivocally mine, were already mentally reallocated to Alexander's man cave. The cold knot in my chest solidified into something sharper, something that felt like a weapon. The next few days blurred into a strange, unsettling routine. My car, a reliable old sedan I'd paid off last year, became my bedroom. I parked in different supermarket lots each night, trying to blend in, trying not to look like I lived there. Mornings were for gas station bathrooms, where I'd wash my face, brush my teeth, and try to make myself presentable for my barista shift. Afternoons, I'd find a quiet corner in a public library or a coffee shop, not my own, obviously, to work on my freelance graphic design projects. The money was tight, but I was still making it work. The initial shock and heartbreak slowly gave way to a simmering, quiet rage. It wasn't the kind that made me want to scream or cry. It was the kind that made my mind clear, analytical. They thought they'd rendered me powerless. They thought wrong. My first call was to Evelyn. She's my older cousin, 31, and a lawyer. More importantly, she's the only person in my family who has ever truly seen me, truly understood the dynamics at play. I'd always confided in her about Rosalind's favoritism, Alexander's endless demands, the way I felt like a ghost in my own home. "Hey, Ev," I said, my voice a little rough from lack of sleep. I was parked in a quiet cul-de-sac, staring at a neatly manicured lawn that felt a million miles away from my current reality. "Serenity, are you okay? I've been trying to reach you," she said, her voice immediately laced with concern. "Your mom called, said you just left. Said you were being dramatic about Alexander needing more space." I let out a bitter laugh. Dramatic? She handed me a trash bag for my life, Ev. They're already redecorating my room for Alexander's man cave. They didn't even wait. I quickly recounted the past few days, the trash bag, the email draft. Evelyn listened patiently, her silence punctuated by sharp intakes of breath. Okay. Deep breaths, Serenity, she finally said, her lawyer brain kicking in. So, you're out of the house? Where are you? I told her about the car, the parking lots. There was a pause, then a sigh. All right. First, you need a safe place to land. Can you come to my place? I have a spare room, no questions asked. Relief washed over me, a warmth I hadn't realized I was craving. Thank you, Ev. I will. But first, there are a couple of things I need to check on. You know how Mom always said Grandfather Gilbert's old furniture was in that storage unit, and the safety deposit box at the bank with the family heirlooms. Yeah. I was the one who went with her to set up both accounts years ago, when Grandfather passed. I signed as the co-signer for both. Do you think... would I still have control? Evelyn was quiet for a moment. If you're a named co-signer, yes, absolutely. You'd have equal access, equal control. She can't lock you out. It's legally yours as much as it's hers. Why? Because Rosalind always told Alexander that Grandfather Gilbert promised him his antique desk, his war medals, his old pocket watch, all the things he cherished. She said they were Alexander's inheritance. But I remember Grandfather talking to me about those things. He loved me, Ev. He always saw me. Evelyn's voice hardened. Serenity, your mother has a long history of twisting facts to suit her narrative, especially when it comes to Alexander. If you're a co-signer, you have leverage. Significant leverage. Those are family assets. You need to verify that immediately. Get to the bank. Get to the storage unit. Control those assets. It's not just about revenge, Serenity. It's about finally taking back what's yours, what you've always deserved, after years of being the invisible one. Her words hit me hard. Years of being the invisible one. She was right. This wasn't just about getting even. It was about reclaiming myself. The next morning, after a quick shower at Evelyn's apartment, I went to the bank. My heart pounded as I handed over my ID. The teller confirmed it. Serenity Martin, co-signer. I signed the form, my hand steady, and was led to the vault. The safety deposit box was small, cold metal. Inside, nestled among a few old photos and some costume jewellery Rosalind rarely looked at, was a thick, yellowed envelope. It wasn't jewellery. It wasn't even a deed. It was a formal document, folded neatly. My grandfather's handwriting, unmistakable, was scrawled across the front. Last Will and Testament, Gilbert Martin. I pulled it out, my breath catching. Rosalind had always said Grandfather died without a proper will, that everything just defaulted to her. But here it was, and as I skimmed the first few paragraphs, my eyes landed on a specific clause, typed and underlined. To my beloved granddaughter, Serenity Martin, who has always shown me the most profound kindness and understanding, I bequeath my antique mahogany writing desk, my collection of military medals, and my cherished gold pocket watch. These items are to be hers, and hers alone, to do with as she sees fit. The world tilted. Rosalind hadn't just twisted the facts, she'd outright lied. She hadn't just promised Alexander things that weren't hers to give. She'd actively hidden my grandfather's true wishes. Alexander's inheritance was actually mine. The discovery of Grandfather Gilbert's will was like a jolt of pure adrenaline. It wasn't just about the items themselves, though knowing the antique desk and his medals were truly mine was a powerful validation. It was the lie. The deliberate, calculated lie Rosalind had spun for years, painting Alexander as the favored grandchild even in death. It fueled the quiet rage that had been simmering inside me. I moved into Evelyn's spare room that evening. It was a small, cozy space, a stark contrast to the supermarket parking lots. For the first time in days, I felt a semblance of safety, a place where I could breathe and think. Evelyn, true to her nature, didn't pry, but she offered quiet support, a cup of tea, and the unspoken understanding that I was building something. Over the next 2 weeks, while I continued my barista shifts and freelance work, I started building my case. Evelyn had advised me to compile everything. "Documentation is your best friend, Serenity," she'd said. "Especially when dealing with a narcissist. They rely on gaslighting and emotional manipulation. Facts are your shield." So, I started with the financial logs. Every grocery bill I'd paid, every utility payment I'd covered, every time I'd chipped in for a household repair that Rosalind claimed she couldn't afford. I had bank statements, receipts, Venmo transfers. It all added up, far beyond the token rent I'd paid. I also started a new document, logging every instance of emotional labor. The times I'd driven Rosalind to appointments, the hours I'd spent listening to Alexander's fabricated dramas, the family events I'd organized and paid for. It was a staggering amount of invisible work that had gone unacknowledged and unappreciated. My immediate focus, though, was Alexander. Rosalind had kicked me out for his fragile mental health. I needed to see just how fragile it was. I created a burner social media account, a generic profile with no ties to me, and started following Alexander and Lexi, his girlfriend. Lexi, 22, was a few years younger than me and pretty active on TikTok. What I saw wasn't a picture of a young man struggling with debilitating anxiety. It was a parade. Alexander's Instagram was suddenly full of new gadgets, a top-of-the-line gaming PC, a new drone, expensive headphones. Each post was captioned with some variation of, "Self-care is important when you're battling demons," or "treating myself to some peace of mind." He even had a GoFundMe, linked in his bio, titled "Fighting Depression, Help Alexander Rebuild His Life." The description was a masterpiece of victimhood, detailing his severe anxiety, his crippling depression, and his need for a safe, supportive environment to heal. The comments were full of well-meaning relatives and family friends, sending prayers and donations. It made my blood boil. Then came Lexi's TikToks. One video, uploaded just a few days after I moved out, showed a room tour. It was my old room, but completely transformed. Dark grey walls, a massive flat-screen TV mounted above a sleek new gaming setup, a plush recliner in the corner. Alexander was sprawled on the bed, playing a video game, laughing. Lexi's caption read, "So proud of my man for prioritizing his mental health. New room set up for new vibes. Mental health matters, new beginnings, your healing journey." The irony was a bitter taste in my mouth. My new beginning was living out of my car, while his was a lavish redecoration of my former home, funded by lies. Rosalind, of course, was playing her part. I saw a Facebook post in our church's private group, an elaborate update from her. "Finally, peace has been restored in our home," she wrote. accompanied by a photo of her and Alexander smiling, Alexander looking remarkably undepressed. Alexander is finding his footing again, and we are so blessed to have a tranquil space for him to heal. It's been a challenging time, but faith and family always prevail. The comments were full of amens and "so glad Alexander is doing better." They were building a narrative, a carefully constructed lie that painted Alexander as the struggling hero and Rosalind as the sacrificing mother. And I was the convenient, dramatic problem who had simply vanished. But I wasn't just watching. I was collecting screenshots of Alexander's posts, Lexi's videos, Rosalind's public declarations. I was building my revenge puzzle piece by deliberate piece, choosing impact over speed. Then, about 10 days after I'd moved out, a new video popped up on Lexi's TikTok. It was a short clip, clearly filmed at a party, with loud music and flashing lights. Alexander was holding court with a group of friends, a red Solo cup in his hand, looking completely unburdened. "Dude, how'd you swing the new setup?" one friend yelled over the music. Alexander grinned, leaning in conspiratorially. "Easy, man. Just gotta play the mental health card. Mom eats it up. Told her I was having, crippling anxiety attacks. Couldn't even leave my room. She kicked Serenity out to make space." He laughed, a harsh, grating sound. "Even got a GoFundMe going. People are so gullible. Just gotta make sure I keep those fake therapy notes looking legit." He winked, then took a long swig from his cup. "It's like free money, free space. Total win." The video was short, maybe 10 seconds, but it was enough to confirm every suspicion, every painful truth. He wasn't sick. He was just a manipulative, entitled brat, and Rosalind was his willing accomplice. The rage inside me sharpened, honed to a fine point. Alexander's drunken confession on Lexi's TikTok was the final piece of the puzzle. It wasn't just that he was faking it. He was bragging about it, laughing at the gullibility of everyone, including our mother. The rage that had been a cold, steady hum inside me now felt like a controlled burn, precise and focused. I continued my routine, barista shifts, graphic design work from Evelyn's spare room, and meticulously logging every detail of my family's deception. Evelyn was a rock, offering legal advice and a quiet, knowing nod whenever I showed her a new screenshot. "They're digging their own grave, Serenity," she'd say, "and you're collecting the shovels." About 3 days after Alexander's TikTok confession, my phone buzzed with an unfamiliar number. I hesitated, then answered. "Serenity? It's Lexi." Her voice was small, hesitant, nothing like the bubbly persona she projected online. I didn't say anything, just waited. "Look, I know this is probably weird," she continued, rushing her words, "but I saw that TikTok Alexander posted, the one where he was, bragging. I took it down, but I saw you watched it before I could." "And?" I asked, my voice flat. I wasn't going to make this easy for her. "And I feel really bad," she blurted out. He's been saying a lot of stuff about you, about your mom. It's not right. I can't be part of it anymore." This was the emotional twist I hadn't expected. Lexi, the bystander, the one who'd cheerfully filmed the man cave transformation, was feeling guilt. It was a crack in their carefully constructed facade. "What kind of stuff?" I pressed, my heart rate picking up. He's been sending me messages, screenshots of texts with your mom, Lexi said, her voice dropping to a whisper. He's always complaining about her, even while she's doing everything for him. He calls her Rosie the robot, because she just does whatever he says. He told me he fakes therapy notes by just Googling symptoms and writing them down. He skips his actual therapy appointments to play video games or go out with friends, then tells your mom he had a breakthrough and needs more money for healing supplies. My grip tightened on the phone. Not only was I expendable, I was the punchline. My mother, the woman who claimed to love me, was being openly mocked by the son she blindly favored. He also said he's been telling your mom he needs rent money, but he's just spending it on new games and clothes. He said, and I quote, "Mom eats out of my hand. It's pathetic. She thinks I'm fragile, but I'm just smart." Lexi paused, taking a shaky breath. He even said he was going to get her to pay for a new car for him, because his anxiety makes it hard to use public transport. I closed my eyes, picturing Rosalind's face, her feigned concern, her endless sacrifices for Alexander. And all the while, he was laughing at her, at both of us. The betrayal was deeper than I'd imagined. It wasn't just about being kicked out. It was about being fooled, being used as a pawn in their twisted game. "Lexi," I said, my voice low. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because it's wrong," she said, her voice gaining a little strength. "I've seen how stressed you were, always working, always helping out, and he just takes. And your mom enables him. I can't stand by and watch it anymore. I've got screenshots of everything. Serenity. All his messages, the fake therapy notes he showed me, the bank transfers from your mom he spent on stupid stuff. I can send them to you." "Send them," I said, my mind already racing, calculating. This was gold. This was undeniable proof. She agreed, and a few minutes later, my phone buzzed with a torrent of images. Alexander's cruel, mocking words, his blatant lies, all laid bare. It was sickening, but empowering. Then, just as I was about to thank her and hang up, Lexi dropped the biggest truth, a bombshell that shifted the entire narrative. "There's one more thing," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "I found a letter. Your mom wasn't just planning to help Alexander. She was planning to refinance the house, and she was going to use your name. As a co-signer, she had a draft letter with your name typed in, ready to go. I think she was going to forge your signature." My breath hitched. My name. Forged. On a mortgage refinance. This wasn't just emotional manipulation or petty theft of my belongings. This was fraud. Identity fraud. This was a criminal act. The cold, precise rage inside me flared into something else, a chilling, absolute certainty. They had crossed a line, and now there was no turning back. Lexi's revelation about the forged refinance paperwork hit me like a physical blow. It wasn't just about the emotional betrayal anymore, or even the theft of my possessions. This was a direct assault on my financial future, a criminal act that could ruin me. The cold, precise rage that had been building inside me solidified into something entirely different, a calm, almost serene determination. The anger was gone, replaced by a chilling clarity. I immediately called Evelyn. "Identity fraud," I stated, my voice steady despite the tremor in my hands. "Rosalind was planning to refinance the house using my name. Lexi found a draft letter." Evelyn was silent for a moment, then a sharp intake of breath. Serenity! That's huge! That's a felony! Do you have proof? Lexi sent me screenshots of Alexander's texts mocking Mom and me, the fake therapy notes, everything, and she saw the letter. She described it perfectly. Okay, Evelyn said, her voice now all business. This changes everything. We need to move fast. First, you need to secure your assets, the storage unit and the safety deposit box. Do it today. I didn't hesitate. I drove straight to the bank. With the will safely in my possession, I withdrew the contents of the safety deposit box. Inside, carefully wrapped in tissue paper, were Grandfather Gilbert's military medals, a Purple Heart, a Bronze Star, and a few others I didn't recognize immediately. There was also his gold pocket watch, heavy and smooth in my palm, and a small, leather-bound journal. These were mine. Legally. Next, the storage unit. I still had my spare key. I drove there, my heart thumping with a mixture of anticipation and dread. The unit was packed, mostly with my grandfather's furniture, some old boxes of my childhood toys, and a few pieces of furniture I'd bought myself that Rosalind had insisted be stored out of the way. I found the antique mahogany writing desk, just as Grandfather had described it. It was dusty, but sturdy, and beautiful. I didn't have a truck, and I wasn't about to move everything myself, but I could change the lock. I bought a heavy-duty padlock from the hardware store next door and replaced the old one. Now, only I had access. Rosalind and Alexander wouldn't be getting their hands on Grandfather's desk, or anything else, without my permission. Back at Evelyn's, I started the next phase. Evelyn helped me draft a cease and desist letter against the use of my financial identity. It was a formal, legal document, warning Rosalind of the severe legal consequences of attempting to forge my signature or use my name for any financial transaction without my express written consent. We made it clear that any attempt would be met with immediate legal action, including reporting it to the authorities as identity fraud. Then came the pièce de résistance, the invoice. I opened a new document on my laptop, a spreadsheet. I started with the housing costs, the years of groceries I'd bought, the utility bills I'd covered, the repairs I'd paid for. I meticulously calculated the market rate for rent in our area, even if I was only paying a fraction of it to Rosalind. Then, the mental health therapy fees I'd covered for Alexander's previous struggles. Actual therapy before he started faking it. I added the value retention for the heirlooms, the items Rosalind had claimed were Alexander's, but were legally mine. And finally, the emotional labor. This was harder to quantify, but Evelyn helped me assign a reasonable hourly rate for personal assistance for the hours I'd spent driving, listening, supporting, and cleaning up their messes. The numbers added up quickly. I double-checked every entry, every calculation. I wanted it to be undeniable. The final total stared back at me. 14,868. It was a staggering amount, a tangible representation of all the invisible labor, the quiet sacrifices, the years of being taken for granted. It wasn't just a bill. It was a statement. That night, the sky was a deep, inky black. I drove back to my old house, the one I'd been forced out of. My heart was calm, my hands steady on the wheel. I pulled up to the curb, killed the engine, and just sat there for a moment, looking at the familiar porch light. I had a copy of the invoice printed on crisp, professional paper, and in a small velvet box, nestled securely, were Grandfather Gilbert's authenticated war medals. I had taken them to a local appraiser Evelyn recommended, just to be sure they were real and to get an official valuation. They were. I walked up the driveway, the gravel crunching softly under my feet. The house was dark, quiet. They were probably asleep, oblivious. I slipped the invoice and the small velvet box into their mailbox, not bothering to open the flap. I just placed them inside, a silent, undeniable declaration. Then I turned and walked back to my car. I didn't look back. I just got in, started the engine, and drove away. And I waited. 18 blistering days. That's how long I waited after dropping the invoice and grandfather's medals in their mailbox. 18 days of silence from them. 18 days of me continuing my work, building my financial stability, and refining my strategy with Evelyn. I had moved into Evelyn's spare room permanently by now, paying her a fair share of rent, a stark contrast to the vague, unacknowledged contributions I'd made at home. I was 25, Alexander was 21, and Rosalind was 48. The ages, the relationships, the dynamics, they were all fixed in my mind, a mental ledger of grievances and facts. The silence from Rosalind was telling. She was either ignoring it, hoping it would go away, or she was stewing, trying to figure out her next move. I knew her. She hated anything that threatened her carefully curated image. Today was the day. Midday. I knew Rosalind would be home, probably fussing over Alexander, who was likely still recovering from his latest fictional ailment. I drove my car, the same reliable sedan, to the house. The familiar street, the manicured lawn, the porch light that always seemed to be on. It all looked the same, but felt alien. I walked up to the porch, my heart beating a steady, calm rhythm. My hand went to the hidden emergency key under the mat, the one they'd forgotten I knew about, the one they'd forgotten to retrieve. It was still there, a small victory, but a victory nonetheless. The lock clicked softly. I pushed the door open and stepped inside. The air was thick with the faint scent of something sweet, probably one of Rosalind's overly elaborate air fresheners. The living room was exactly as I remembered it, except for a few new, expensive-looking gadgets on the coffee table. Alexander's, no doubt. Rosalind was in the kitchen, humming softly as she rearranged flowers in a vase. Alexander was sprawled on the couch in the living room, exactly where I'd expected him, glued to the massive new TV that had replaced my ancient one. He didn't even look up. "Mom?" I said, my voice cutting through her humming. Rosalind jumped, dropping a flower. She spun around, her eyes wide, her face draining of color. "Serenity, what are you doing here?" Her voice was a mixture of shock and indignation. Alexander finally looked up, his eyes narrowing. "What the hell, Serenity? You can't just walk in here." I ignored him. My gaze was fixed on Rosalind. "I'm here to discuss a few things, Mom." "Things you've been ignoring." I walked into the living room, pulling a slim folder from my bag. It contained the invoice, copies of the will, the screenshots from Lexi, and the cease and desist letter. I laid the folder on the coffee table, right next to Alexander's feet. "The invoice," I began, my voice clear and even. "For the $14,872.68 you owe me for years of unpaid household contributions, Alexander's therapy fees I covered, and the value of the heirlooms you tried to steal." Rosalind scoffed, finding her voice. "Steal? Serenity, you're being ridiculous! And that invoice is absurd! You lived here, you contributed." "I contributed far more than you ever acknowledged." I countered, my eyes unwavering. And speaking of theft, let's talk about Grandfather Gilbert's will. I pulled out the copy of the will. He left his desk, his pocket watch, and his military medals to me. Not Alexander. You lied about that for years, Mom, and you tried to claim them for him. Alexander sat up, his smirk gone. What are you talking about? Grandfather promised me that stuff. No, he didn't, I said, looking at him directly. He left them to me. The will is legally binding. I have the originals. Rosalind's face was a mottled red. This is insane. You're trying to extort us. Alexander, don't listen to her. And then there's this, I continued, pulling out the cease and desist letter. A warning against identity fraud. Lexi told me about the draft letter, Mom. The one where you were planning to refinance the house using my name, forging my signature. Rosalind gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. That's a lie. Lexi is a liar. Is she? I asked, then pulled out the stack of screenshots Lexi had sent me. Are these lies too, Alexander? Your texts, mocking Mom, bragging about faking depression, skipping therapy, and spending rent money on gaming gear? I held up a few, clearly showing his words. Alexander's face went white. He scrambled to grab his phone, as if he could delete the evidence. Lexi, that bitch! Mom, she's lying! She's trying to cause trouble! Rosalind stared at the screenshots, her eyes darting between me and Alexander. Her carefully constructed world was crumbling before her eyes. And finally, I said, pulling out a letter from Evelyn, my lawyer. This is from Evelyn Kelly. It explains my full legal control over the family storage unit, where Grandfather's desk and other items are now secured under a new lock. It also outlines your legal obligations regarding the will and the severe penalties for identity fraud. Rosalind lunged forward, her hand outstretched, trying to snatch the letter from my grasp. Give me that! You can't do this! Alexander, seeing his mother's panic, yelled, Let her leave it! She's bluffing! She's got nothing! I calmly pulled back the letter, out of Rosalind's reach. My eyes met Alexander's, and I saw a flicker of genuine fear in them for the first time. Then I placed a single sheet of paper on the table, right on top of Evelyn's letter. It was a bank form. This, I said, my voice chillingly quiet, is a pending investigation for identity fraud. The bank takes this very seriously, Mom, and so do the police. The bank form, clearly marked Identity Fraud Investigation, pending, landed on the coffee table with a soft thud. Rosalind stared at it, her face a mask of horror. Alexander, who had been about to retort, visibly deflated. The smugness drained from his face, replaced by a raw, uncharacteristic fear. You wouldn't, Rosalind stammered, her voice barely a whisper. Serenity, you're my daughter. You wouldn't ruin your own family. You tried to ruin my financial future, Mom, I said, my voice still calm, devoid of emotion. You kicked me out, stole my belongings, and then tried to forge my signature on a mortgage. That's not what family does. The karma, as Evelyn had put it, began to detonate slowly. Rosalind, obsessed with maintaining her pristine image in the community, was forced to grovel. Evelyn had advised me to offer an out, a chance for them to comply without immediate police involvement, but with strict conditions. Rosalind had to acknowledge the will, transfer the legal rights to Grandfather Gilbert's items to me, and agree to a payment plan for the invoice. More importantly, she had to drop any attempts to refinance the house using my name. The initial phone calls from Rosalind were a whirlwind of tears, accusations, and pleas. "Think of your poor brother. Think of my reputation," she'd shriek. But I held firm. Evelyn handled most of the legal back and forth, sending formal letters, scheduling meetings that Rosalind desperately tried to avoid. Meanwhile, Alexander's world began to unravel. Lexi, true to her word, had sent me all the screenshots. I didn't publicize them, but Evelyn, in her subtle way, let it be known to Rosalind's closest confidants that Alexander's mental health struggles were a sham. The church Facebook group, once full of sympathetic comments, grew eerily quiet. Some of the well-meaning relatives who had donated to his GoFundMe started asking questions. His accounts were flagged, donations paused, and the GoFundMe eventually taken down. Lexi left him. I heard it through a mutual friend. She'd apparently had enough of his constant lies and manipulations. Without Lexi, Alexander lost his primary enabler and his social media presence, which was a huge blow to his inflated ego. He was forced to get a real job, working nights at a local convenience store, a far cry from his healing journey of gaming and spending GoFundMe money. The final blow came in court, not for the identity fraud, which Rosalind had agreed to cease and desist, but for the house. Evelyn had discovered that because I had been a co-signer on the original mortgage application, something Rosalind had insisted on years ago, saying it would help her credit score, I actually had a legal claim to the property. Rosalind had never bothered to take me off the mortgage, probably forgetting I was even on it. The court proceedings were swift. I presented my evidence, the original mortgage documents with my name, the invoice for my contributions, the will proving Rosalind's deception, and Lexi's screenshots, presented as evidence of Alexander's manipulative behavior, not for direct fraud charges against him, but to establish a pattern of deception within the household. Rosalind, flustered and uncharacteristically quiet, tried to paint me as an ungrateful daughter. Alexander sat beside her, sullen and defeated. The judge, a no-nonsense woman with sharp eyes, listened patiently. She reviewed my meticulously organized documents, Evelyn's clear legal arguments, and Rosalind's increasingly desperate and contradictory statements. Finally, she leaned forward, looking directly at Rosalind. "Ms. Martin, it appears your daughter, Serenity Martin, has been a significant financial and emotional contributor to this household for many years. She is a legal co-owner on this mortgage. Your attempts to exclude her, to claim her property, and to potentially commit identity fraud are deeply concerning." Then she turned to me. "Ms. Martin, based on the evidence presented, I find in your favor. You retain your name on the mortgage. Furthermore, given the circumstances, you have the legal right to evict your mother and brother from the property." A silence fell over the courtroom. Rosalind's jaw dropped. Alexander looked like he'd been slapped. The judge looked at me again, a hint of something unreadable in her eyes. "Seems the wrong child was deemed a burden." I felt no triumph, no elation, just a quiet, profound sense of justice. The power had fully shifted. I had used my control over the physical, legal, and emotional legacy of the family to restore my autonomy. It wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about freedom. The judge's words echoed in my mind long after I left the courtroom. "Seems the wrong child was deemed a burden." It wasn't a victory cry, not for me. It was a cold, hard truth, finally spoken aloud. The eviction process wasn't immediate, of course. It took weeks, a slow, agonizing grind of legal notices, deadlines, and Rosalind's increasingly desperate phone calls to Evelyn. Rosalind tried every trick in the book. Feigned illness, appeals to my family loyalty, even vague threats about going to the media. But Evelyn was unyielding, a legal fortress. Each time Rosalind tried to delay, Evelyn would simply remind her of the pending identity fraud investigation, the legal precedent of the will, and the judge's clear ruling. The threat of public humiliation and criminal charges was enough to keep Rosalind in line. Barely. Eventually, the day came. It was a Tuesday, late morning. I stood across the street, watching from my car. A moving truck was parked in front of the house. Rosalind, her face blotchy and tear-streaked, was directing two movers with frantic, jerky gestures. Alexander, looking pale and furious, was carrying a few boxes out himself, slamming them into the truck bed. Lexi was nowhere to be seen, of course. She'd cut ties completely. I saw Rosalind point at the new gaming setup in what used to be my room, now Alexander's man cave. The movers carefully disconnected the large TV and packed it away. Alexander's expensive gaming chair followed. They were taking everything they could, but it was all their stuff. My grandfather's desk, the medals, the watch, they were safe with me, stored at Evelyn's for now. I watched them drive away, the moving truck pulling out first, followed by Rosalind's car, Alexander riding shotgun, his face still a mask of resentment. The street was quiet again. The house stood empty, a hollow shell. I waited another hour, just to be sure. Then I walked across the street, the key to the front door feeling heavy in my hand. I let myself in. The house was silent. The air felt thin, devoid of the constant hum of Rosalind's anxieties and Alexander's demands. My old room was stripped bare, the dark grey paint a stark reminder of their hasty redecoration. The living room was empty, save for the faint outlines on the carpet where furniture had sat for decades. Every corner held a memory, a ghost of the life I'd lived here, the life I'd tried so hard to hold together. I walked through each room, not with anger, but with a strange sense of detachment. This wasn't my home anymore. It hadn't been for a long time. It was just a building, a place where I'd learned the hard lessons about invisible labor and conditional love. I didn't want to stay. The victory tasted like ash in my mouth. Revenge didn't heal the scars, but it had certainly released me from the burden. I had already found a new apartment, a small, quiet one-bedroom downtown, just a few blocks from my barista job. It was mine, truly mine, with a lease in my name only. I'd financed the first few months' rent and deposit by selling Grandfather Gilbert's gold pocket watch. It had been a difficult decision, but a necessary one. The appraiser had confirmed its value, and it provided the immediate capital I needed to start fresh without relying on anyone. The medals, however, I kept. They were a tangible link to the one person who had truly seen me, and a reminder of the truth. Rosalind, under Evelyn's relentless pressure and the threat of legal action, had finally agreed to a compliance agreement. It wasn't the full $1,472.60 from the invoice. We settled for a smaller, but still significant payout that covered a good portion of my documented contributions and served as a clear admission of her wrongdoing. It was enough. Enough to prove my point. Enough to show her that I wasn't going to be silent anymore. A few days later, I was sitting on the floor of my new empty apartment, surrounded by boxes. My few belongings from Evelyn's spare room and the items I'd retrieved from the storage unit were stacked neatly. The antique mahogany desk, grandfather's desk, stood proudly in the corner, waiting for me to set up my graphic design equipment. This was my space. My beginning. My phone buzzed. It was Evelyn. "Freedom looks good on you," her text read. I smiled, a genuine, unburdened smile. She was right. It did. The emotional cost had been immense, but the autonomy I felt now was worth every painful step. I had spent so long trying to earn love, to prove my worth, to hold a fragmented family together. Now I was choosing myself. Later that night, after unpacking a few essentials, I sat at grandfather's desk, the soft glow of my laptop screen illuminating the room. I opened a new browser tab, navigating to a familiar forum. I typed out my story, raw and unvarnished, just like I'd lived it. I didn't use names, just vague descriptions. I didn't ask for sympathy. I just told the facts, the lessons learned. I titled the post, "My Mom Demanded I Move Out so my brother could have my room." My fingers hovered over the post button. Then I added a final line, a warning, a piece of advice forged in the fire of my own experience. If you're the family scapegoat, the one who always gives and never gets, document everything, every dollar, every favor, every lie. Someday, you might need it. I did.